In this video, I will demonstrate how to build this nice dashboard that displays the latest COVID statistics for every country in the world. As we can see, selecting a country will display the number of COVID cases in the country, as well the number of recovered people and the number of deaths and the number of tests in the country. In this tutorial, we will use disease.sh as our data source. It's a free and open data API, and it will provide us with the most recent COVID-19 data worldwide. So without further ado, let's get started. So we're gonna be using OpenLayers to create our dashboard, and the first step would be that we create an OpenLayers project. And for this, I'm gonna go to terminal and type npm create ol app and then give the app name. I'm gonna call it COVID-19 dashboard, and this command is going to generate an OpenLayers project. Then I'm gonna navigate to the project and then start the project by calling npm start. So now the project is running under localhost. So if you hold command and click, it's going to open in the browser. And now we only just have a map, nothing else. So let's start modifying this map. And I'm gonna go to Visual Studio and open the project files here. So now we have the project opened in Visual Studio, and we can see these files now index.html. So this is the HTML that is showing the page, and main.js. This is a JavaScript file which is displaying the map. And first we're gonna modify this HTML file and start designing our dashboard. So the first step, we're gonna rename it to COVID-19 dashboard. And then I'm gonna add Bootstrap framework to make the user interface design more easier. I'm gonna head to the browser, Bootstrap website, and then copy this link and then paste it here. So now we have Bootstrap library in our project, and then I'm gonna add a navigation bar. So in our dashboard, we want to see here a navigation bar which has the dashboard title. So using Bootstrap, this is how we make a navigation bar. So I'm gonna copy this one and then paste it inside the body tag and click save. And then I'm gonna take a look at the project. It seems that the map is occupying the whole page. So I'm gonna open the style.css file and add some properties to the map class. So I'm gonna delete these and add some height. I'm gonna say 400 pixels and click save. Now we can see our navigation bar. I wanna make it dark, so I'm gonna head to index.html and then change the classes to from navbar light to navbar dark, and the same here. Now we have a nice dark navigation bar, but we forgot to change the title, so it's COVID-19 dashboard. And now we have the navigation bar, and the next step, we're gonna resize the map and add the card view. So on the right side we can see the number of cases, the number of COVID cases. And for this we're gonna make some grid layout. So it's a typical CSS layout, and we're gonna go below the navigation bar and design a container. So I'm gonna make a div class container. So this goes here, and inside the container we're gonna design our layout, and the CSS, typical CSS layout has 12 grid elements. So we're gonna allocate 8 elements to the map and 4 to the card that will display the number of cases. So here we're gonna define a div, and we're gonna give it the class of column 8, and then we're gonna place the map inside this one. So now our map is occupying 8 of the 8 elements of the CSS grid, and the rest will be occupied by the card view. So down, gonna define another div, and I'll give it the class of column 4, and this div will hold the card view, which will be displaying the number of cases. So I'm gonna call it card. I'm gonna give it a width, so style width of 350 pixels. And inside this card we're gonna add the card body, so it's another div. And inside our card body we're gonna place the elements of the card. So first we want to display the country name and the flag. So for the country name, we're going to define a heading H5, and we're going to give it an ID. So later we're going to assign the country name to this heading. And the class is car title, and give it a style. So display inline block, and we're gonna put a placeholders, the word country. So later we're gonna assign the country name to this header. So instead of country, we will see the country name which was selected, and we're gonna add an image for the flag. So ID flag, and the width is 30. So we want it to show as a small flag, and then we're going to display the cases below. So we're going to make a form, and inside this form we're gonna display the COVID cases and the number of recovered people in one row, and in the second row we're going to display the number of deaths and the number of tests. So here we're going to make a div of class row. So this is going to be a row, and we would add some margin to the bottom so it doesn't collide with the row below. And here we're gonna add a form. So this form would be a label and a text. So the label would be cases and the text would be the number of cases. So I'm gonna make a div. So form group, and with the column 6 CSS element, and inside we're gonna make a label for the input cases. So here we're gonna call it cases, and the input would be text, and here we are just using a form so that we can group the two texts together, but we are not going to modify the text of the cases number. So we're gonna make it as read only, and we're gonna give it a class so it has a proper look. Form control plain text, and ID is cases. So this label will be attached to this text, because here we refer that this label is for cases, and here we see the ID of cases. And we don't want to keep a placeholder, so we're gonna keep it empty, and we're gonna make it bold, so the font style will be, the font weight would be bold. And now we can take a look at the dashboard. You can see it down here, but it's a little bit down, so we're gonna check what happened. So apparently we had to place our column layout inside the row layout here, and then we can see that the map view and the card view, they are on the same row and it's not placed down, and this is what we want. And then we're gonna continue with the rest of the card elements. So to make it easier, we're gonna copy this div and duplicate it. And here it will be recovered. So this one will display the number of recovered people. And we would like to add another row which displays the number of deaths and the number of tests. So I'm gonna duplicate the whole row and change the text. So this will be death. This is here, this is, and here as well. This one will be tests. Here and here. So now we should be able to see these 4 elements on the card view, and it seems that we have a problem. Element is missing a tag. So there is a missing tag. So now we can see the other elements. So finally, for the user interface, I'm gonna add a little margin to separate our container from the navigation bar. And here I'm gonna define a margin top. I'm gonna give it the value of 16 pixels. And now if we take a look, now we see that there is a gap between the navigation bar and our container. And then let's make this map work. So I'm gonna head back to Visual Studio and we're gonna modify our main.javascript. So this is the file which is now rendering the map. And what we're gonna do is we want to place a vector layer on top of the current map. And this vector layer is a layer which has all the countries in the world. And once we click on a country, we're gonna want to extract the country ID and then pass it to the API of diseases.sh, so it will return us the COVID information. So I already have a GeoJSON file which has all the countries in the world. And yeah, so here I'm gonna create a new directory. I'm gonna call it data, and then copy this GeoJSON file here. I'm gonna do it in Finder. So now we have our GeoJSON file here, and we can take a look at the file. We can see it's a file which has the country ID and the country name and the geometry of the country, the boundaries. And we're gonna go back to our main.javascript and start writing some functions to place the vector layer. So first we're gonna define a vector layer. So I'm gonna call const vector layer is equal to new vector layer. And inside this vector layer we're gonna define a new object called vector source. So here I'm gonna define new vector source, and here we have to give the source of the vector file, whether it's from the web or you have it locally. Now in our case we have it locally, so now I'm gonna give the property URL, and here we're gonna place the path of the local file. So it's data countries .geojson, and we have to tell which format is this. So here format, it's a GeoJSON file. And now we have loaded our vector file here, but we wanna give a style to the vector layer. So we're gonna define a style here. New style. And here we're going to define a fill for the vector layer. So the color of the vector layer. New fill. and we're gonna give a color value RGBA. I'm gonna say 255 for all RGB, and a transparency of 0.6. So yeah, and we're gonna add a stroke. So stroke means the border line. New stroke. And I already have a predefined value. So it's 319FD3. And we're gonna give a width of the borderline of 1. And we're gonna add a text property, so for styling the text. And we have to import text as well. So the color of the text, the fill color, will be a black color. Sorry, I wrote pound instead of hash. So this is a black color, and stroke, the border of the text. Would be a white border, and the width will be 3. And now we defined our style. We have to add this style to our vector layer. So here we're gonna call style function feature and style dot get text. So set text so this is going to apply, it's going to place the country name as a label for each feature in our vector layer. And we wanna get the name value from our GeoJSON file. So we're gonna label the countries with their names. And then we're gonna return the style. And now we created our vector layer, but still it's not being displayed on the map. And for this we have to pass our vector layer to our map, and we can go to layers. We can see we have an array of layers. So the first layer is the base map that we see, and I'm gonna add a comma and add the vector layer here, and now we should be able to see our vector layer on the map. So we click refresh. Seems that there is an issue. Let's see the log, and it says it cannot find the variable GeoJSON. So we have to import GeoJSON. From OpenLayers format GeoJSON. Now we can see our map, and we can see the vector layer on top of the base map, and we can see all the countries and the style we added to the vector layer and the labels of the countries. And now if we click on a country, nothing will happen because we didn't add any interactions to the map. And now we have to add select interaction. So if we click on a feature, it will select this feature. So we're going to head back to Visual Studio. And below the map, we can define a select element, const select new select, it's select, not selection. So we have to import it here as well. Select from OpenLayers interactions, select. And now if the select object is not null, so if the select object is not null, we're going to add a map interaction. We're going to call our map and then call add interactions and pass the select object. Now if we go to our map, we can see that we can select the countries. And now we're going to add a function to the select object, and this function will execute some code when a country is selected. So when a country is selected, we would like to fetch the COVID data of the selected country. And we're going to go to the select object and then call select.on select and function event So inside this block, we can run some code when a country is selected. So what we're going to do here is we're going to call the disease.sh endpoint here, and we have to give it the country ID. So if we take a look at the disease.sh API, we can see this is the API, and the last part of the API is the country ID. So we're gonna fetch the country ID from the event here. So we're gonna define a variable country and then call event.target get features get array ID. So if we print this event on the console, if we say console.log and print this event, so if we go to inspect and click on console and select the country, now this is the event that we printed. So it's inside target, and by calling the following lines, we will get the selected country ID. So inside target, we will have get features, there is an array, there is the ID that we want. And we can try and print the country ID. If we click on Sudan, we can see the country ID SDN, USA, Germany, and like that. So now we can select the country from the vector layer and get the country ID. Now we're going to call the diseases.sh API. So we're going to use fetch, and it's a get request. So we're going to paste the API from here. We're going to copy and paste. And instead of USA, we want to pass the selected country. So we're going to add country here. And here we will pass the selected country. And we want to parse the response of this endpoint, and the response will include the number of cases of COVID-19 and a lot of more data about the COVID situation. So we're going to call then a response return. We're going to convert the response to JSON. We're going to call then again. So we're going to get the converted response, which we converted to JSON, and we're gonna pass it to a variable called data. So we can print and see the data object. See what do we see. So if we click on a country, you're gonna see the response from the disease.sh endpoint. And here we can see all the COVID information, and what we are interested in are the cases and deaths recovered and the tests. Of course, you can customize it to and display any data you want. And we're gonna go to Visual Studio Code, and we're gonna update the user interface. So we're gonna access our card view by calling document get element by ID, and we want to access the cases element, and we want to modify the value of the cases. So the value of cases will be equal to data.cases. So if we go back to our map and select the country, we can see that here we see the number of cases. We're gonna do the same for the recovered and tests and death. I'm gonna duplicate this one, recovered, here death, tests. We're gonna modify here. And recovered. So now we should see the 4 elements when we click on a country. And yes, now we see the number of cases, the recovered, the number of recoveries, and the number of deaths, and the number of tests. And we forgot to display the country name and the flag, so we're gonna do that. And we're gonna call document.get element by ID, and the country name, the text that we defined for the country name was having an ID of F title, and we're gonna access that. Let me check again. Yes, so it's F title. .inner HTML. So here we use inner.html, inner HTML, because we are changing the value of an HTML element. But for these 4 values, we use the input tag. So it's like we are using an input. So to modify them, we have to call value. But here we call inner HTML, and it's going to be equal to data.country. So this will display the country name. And for the flag, we're gonna call document.getElement by ID flag. And here we want to change the attribute of source SRS. So the image source data, and we can see the image source here. If we go to country info flag, so here we have the image URL, country info dot flag. So now we can see the country name and the flag and the COVID information. And a final step in this tutorial, as we can notice, these numbers doesn't have commas, and this would make it hard to read. So we're gonna add some commas to these numbers. And for that, I found a function on Stack Overflow that will add commas to the numbers. So I'm gonna paste it here. It's called number with commas. And we're gonna wrap these values with this function. So number with commas. And for this, so now we should be able to see the COVID numbers with commas. So if we click on Germany, we can see the current cases, and now the number is readable, more readable. And yeah, if we click on other countries, we can as well see the information, the country name and the flag. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and I'll see you in another tutorials. Goodbye.